Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hey kids, welcome to Grumpy Nostalgia, the Second Look Cinema podcast, the show where we go back to the blockbuster new release wall in your memory, grab a copy off the shelf, put it in the old VCR, and see what time has done to it. But probably more accurately, what time has done to us. I'm Justin, that's Mike,
Tin Hut.
and we're here to help you navigate all those landmines littered down memory lane. Wow. Okay, Mike, we are in our fourth consecutive week recording.
Goodness.
I don't know. I've caught my second win. I'm ready to keep going.
Oh yeah, this is great.
So, before we get too far ahead, Mike, as I understand it, you have a small little disclaimer or something you'd like to clarify before we get too far ahead. You want to take the wheel?
I will. It's not as much a correction or retraction as more of a clarification. I imagine there was one person out there who heard my Fifth Element description of the plot of the Fifth Element from the last podcast, and I want to make sure that I impart to that one person a true explanation of what I was saying, because what I did say was so heavy-handed and convoluted, and I'm sure it sounded confusing. What I was trying to say, let me say this first. Unlike a newspaper, here on Grumpy Nostalgia, we put our mistakes at the front of our podcast instead of like on page 16. So what I'd like to explain was it was an analogy I made of stylizing. And if it relates to art and architecture, stylizing is like, taking something complicated and making it look simpler to get, just to get the job done. And in my explanation of the plot of the Fifth Element, I was trying to use the analogy of a window, and it really sounded stupid after I said it. I was like, please edit this in post, Justin, but I forgot to tell him that. So my apologies. But anyway, what I was trying to say was the plot of the Fifth Element. No, wait. Let's do this. Let's do it backwards. Picture a rose window in Notre Dame, before it burned. You look at all the detail, Jesus and the disciples, all the intricate colors and lead and steel work in that window. And this would be an apt description of a sci-fi plot for, say, Prometheus or Blade Runner or 2001. Now picture a stained glass window from, say, the 60s or 70s of the last century, where it's just kind of a cinder block Catholic church, and your stained window is a rectangle with colored panes. That is the stylized plot of Fifth Element. So there's your definition. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. Well, thanks you for clarifying that, Mike.
Sure. I knew there was, I could not accept the fact that being in the architecture background that I gave such a, like I said, ham-handed answer to that description. And there was one, I know out there was one person, maybe in Latvia or Serbia or Germany, that heard that was like scratching their head. So I apologize. Like I said, my window analogy was very bad.
Okay, well, again, I appreciate it, as does the podcast listening public. I think it's cute that you went under two assumptions: one, that we have any listeners, and
true,
and two, that the Fifth Element had a plot. But it's still sweet, Mike. It's still very sweet.
Yeah, it reminded me of Doctor Who in reverse. If there are any Whovians out there, they would see cardboard cutouts, paper mache caves. But the story for a Doctor Who episode was like, what? Bonkers, just like over my head, science was just incredible. Right. And then you watch Fifth Element and you got the opposite. You got these lovely, amazing graphics, costumes, settings. But then your story is just kind of, okay, good versus evil.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to pull you out of the Doctor Who vortex because we're going to get a lot of letters. So we're ready to hit it back up again. And, I've been talking to a couple people about the show and what we're doing, and I get some some recommendations like, oh, you guys should do Avatar, or you guys should do something that came out like in the last 5 to 10 years. And first of all, they're kind of missing the point. But then I started thinking about, what do you consider nostalgia, right? So. For some people, Hannah Montana is nostalgic. Just depends on what kind of age you are, right? But what we're trying to do here is, again, if you're maybe listening for the first time, if you're still with us, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to looking at, the Gen Xers. I don't like to use that term, but that generation. The last generation that got spanked or had lead paint or had steel playgrounds and went to the doctors and they were smoking in the waiting room. I'm not saying we're the last great generation, but we are the last generation that can change a car tire. So, but we're
do you remember do you remember the mosquito trucks that would spray like the pesticide from the back of it, and the kids would run after it?
I was an
Is that too
addict.
far?
I got on my BMX and huffed around 4 or 5 blocks. But yeah. So my point is that we're kind of focusing on 80s and the 90s, and because I think that's the golden era of movies, the VHS era. So to that point, over the last couple podcasts, Mike, we've talked a couple of topics. One was sequels, and one was sci-fi, and we thought peanut butter in your chocolate, and you got your chocolate in our peanut butter. Why not we talk about one that is actually both of those? So we're going to look at the sci-fi classic Aliens from 1986, James Cameron. This was a fun one. There's a lot of backstory around this one. So without further ado, let's kind of jump right in. This movie was released on July 18th, 1986. So it's a bit down memory lane there, Mike. It was directed and written by James Cameron. James Cameron wrote this script while he was directing Terminator. He Moonlight. After he was done with principal photography on Terminator, he wrote this script. He was a big fan of the original, obviously the 1979 Ridley Scott version. And it'd been 7 or 8 years, and no sequel had come of that. And he really had some interesting. He wrote like a 45 page treatment and gave it to 20th Century Fox.
And was it just like a spec script? What, he wasn't expecting there to be a sequel. He was just kind of doing it to maybe shop it in the future. Okay.
It was a pitch. He said, I've got an idea to kind of take this story, this 20th Century Fox property that was very successful. And 20th Century Fox was in the toilet around this time. They were in real serious financial trouble, so they kind of put it on the back burner. And I think when the success of Terminator came out, they said, hey, let's revisit this guy's script. So that's kind of how it got started.
Cool.
But yeah, this was in the middle of a kind of a slow era in 1986. There wasn't a lot of big blockbuster movies out of time. I think the only real competition from the theaters at this time was the Big Trouble in Little China was a concurrent movie with this one. But not a lot not a lot going on there. The cast was really kind of makes this movie, Mike, and we have one returning cast member from the original movie. So Mike, I know you probably did a little homework on the cast. Why don't you walk us through who was in this one?
It's not as much homework as it was kind of a crypt notes here. Obviously you have Sigourney Weaver, who plays Ripley in the iconic role, and obviously she was great in Alien, which obviously kind of got her into this role. But I think I know she worked with James Cameron on Avatar, but I couldn't remember any other movie she worked with him on. No, shoot, no, I never remember. I was going to say, kind of to your point about James Cameron, was how great his lead women roles are. You had, obviously from Terminator, he had Sarah Connor as Lynn Hamilton's role. That was, it's a man who can write a lead role. You look at, even Rose from Titanic, or Zoe Saldana in Avatar. And who's the other one? Alita, the movie, the most recent movie he did, the Battle Angel movie, and they're the most believable lead female roles you can imagine, and he seems to be the most apt.
These genres really kind of cater to the damsel in distress, and he kind of flips that whole thing on his head.
They're believable characters. They're not like some of the here. Okay,
yeah.
This is more like, instead of grumpy nostalgia, this is grumpy modern age. You look at some of the movies now, and the female leads are almost unbelievably good. I don't want to use the term Mary Sue, but that's been tossed around by some aspects of the internet. But he writes it where you feel empathy for the character, and you actually see a journey, that the character makes to. She goes from almost addle-brained psycho to Jane Rambo at the end, and it's a believable journey, and
right.
you kind of you empathize and sympathize, and he almost has a master of that particular role, and I just want to make sure we get that out there.
The women are cast; they're not as gimmicks. It pushes the narrative. It's not just a quota box.
There's not a token female lead. This is a female lead that checks all the boxes for any male lead, and does if not the same but better in a role like this. Anyway, enough about Sigourney. This also features a return cast member from one of our podcasts from Twister, Bill Pullman, who you might remember also in Independence Day, and I think he was in While You Were Sleeping.
Like, I think you want to say Bill Paxton.
Oh,
I think you want to mean
sorry, yeah, Paxton.
Bill Paxton.
Gosh,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, he was. That's right. Sorry, wrong Bill. He was lucky enough to star with both Mad About You stars, Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt. So,
Yeah.
What a lucky guy, huh?
Hey, let me stop you there for a minute. I want to go on record and saying that Bill Paxton is the quintessential 90s. I mean, he needs a monument built to him. This guy, go back and look at everything he's been in. You remember him out of everything he's ever been in. And the fact that he's not on the same level as Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt or Bruce Willis, this guy,
it's okay.
I'm sorry. He needs a monument built in.
Yeah.
And we're going to.
I was going to say, he takes those roles that Tom Cruise wouldn't take. Like, imagine his like little wormy character from True Lies, where he's like the car dealer guy. Just incredible role, but just you remember it. I mean, it's just so like he's the most. As great as Sigourney Weaver is in this movie. I remember, Bill Paxton's lines better than anything she said or any scenes that she was in, because
of course
everybody remembers Game Over and This Is a Bug Hunt. Just it's he makes this movie because he's
the sadistic older brother, Chet in Weird Science. Every time he's on the screen, he never looked back. So again, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make special note of our beloved Bill Paxton.
We have another Cameron veteran, Michael Biehn, who was in Terminator, and he was on another one of our podcasts earlier in The Rock. He was, of course, in most of his movies, he's a military, guy, or he's a grunt, or and in this, he's kind of our he's our lead colonial marine on this movie. And then we have Lance Henriksen, where everybody will remember from the movie Pumpkinhead.
Of course,
one of my favorite horror movies.
First with Call, yeah.
He was a co-star with Bill Paxton in Near Dark, so they got that going for him. That's
also in the right stuff.
Don't forget Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and
then
we have Paul Reiser,
another person we met.
That's right.
Well, I didn't meet him, but we saw him with Tony Todd. Remember?
Yeah, they were doing their horror movie panel. He's in he is, I believe, I just saw a preview for it, but I think he's in that new video game Quarry, and he's one of the characters I think they meet. So it's pretty cool. He's still out there and working.
Hundreds of films, resume.
And then you have aforementioned Paul Reiser, who plays in this movie as the kind of the corporate worm, who takes the heel turn somewhere in the middle of the movie. And I don't know about you, but I couldn't get past the puffy kind of 80s hairdo he had. The little vest, his little
wonderful
little vest. That was.
Don't forget the collars on the suit. I love the collar on the suit. That's 80s, boy. Even 2280.
Is that okay? That's what I was going to ask you. What this was 2280. Okay, so this is this is 60 years after Fifth Element, so that's pretty cool. Then you had your vaguely familiar cast of Marines, that kind of rounded out the colonial Marine cast, who were, I think the most impactful one to me was the lady who played Vasquez. I mean, geez, I love that gun she carried the whole movie. It's I think I don't even remember her from any other role, and I just but amazing role for this movie.
She was in. She's in that staple of actors for Cameron. She was in Near Dark. Okay. She was in Near Dark. Remember and she was had a small role in the Titanic. She's not actually Latino.
Okay.
She's actually,
I saw her last
Irish.
like Goldstein or something like that.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, they kind of had to tan her up a little bit to
Interesting.
It was all kind of makeup to give her that Latino look. But she was. Yeah. How awesome was she?
But that is that's your cast for the most part.
This cast really pulls it off. I mean, you remember every character in here, even the subsequent characters, the ancillary characters that they really own the screen when they're on there. A couple other notes for you, Mike. This was shot in Pinewood Studios, one of your favorite locations.
Every damn movie in the 80s and 90s was in there.
And apparently the British guys on the set, the crew, they were completely adamant about not liking or cooperating with James Cameron. They could care less for him. They felt he was, as if it were their right, they felt it was unfair that he was taking the role taking away Ridley Scott's material, and they thought he was too
Of
young. And
course.
yeah, so these union guys made it their business to kind of slow down production with their tea breaks, and yeah, there's a real kind of a lot of animosity on the set here for sure, which was weird. One thing I took special giggles about was that the alien nest at the end of the movie, that is the remnants of Axis Chemical from the Batman, the Tim Burton Batman.
Holy crap!
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so that's weird. Yeah, I was just because I was going to ask you a Tim Burton Batman related question. Was the little girl who plays Newt
Yeah.
in this movie? I have no idea, but I remember this. No, actually, this is Superman 2, I believe, where there's like a kid on the set who says, "Please put my daddy down." It's like an impressive English accent, like you
Yeah.
say. But I couldn't tell this little girl if she was like a Pinewood local or if I couldn't. Her accent was very off-putting. I couldn't
Well,
tell if she was American, English,
she was.
Australian.
They had an interesting workaround. They were required to hire some local talent, and but she was an
Okay.
American. She was an American living
Okay.
in England, and she got the role, her only role.
Okay.
What I thought was funny, I read an interview about her, and she's got the line, they mostly come out at night, mostly.
Yes.
And
Mostly.
apparently her teenage friends thought that was bait to mock her with that line for the rest of her adult life.
Oh no.
To this day, she still gets called out mostly's. I think that was actually brought out in a South Park episode. And Cartman kind of used the mostly thing, which is if Matt and Trey get you're in pop culture status for sure.
Yeah, really. See, I thought they were like, I thought her classmates would rip her more for saying Ripley. Oh my god.
Oh yeah, Newt sucks. But yeah, some other research that the alien eggs, a lot of those were saved off the set, and a lot of them are in the Smithsonian in D.C., which we did not get a chance to see when last time
I
we were
did
there.
not see that. Okay.
No, I think we missed that one, and kind of aggravated about that.
Yes.
This was screened to no test audience. Cameron was not, because of the animosity, he was kind of fighting with Fox, and he refused to have any kind of notes from the studio, or I guess kind of given the situation on set, and he refused to do a test audience. And of course, the studio saw it the first night with everybody else, and it was this huge hit, and it really kind of saved 20th Century Fox from financial ruin in the mid to late 80s. It was a huge
Wow.
Yeah, but so that's kind of how it got there. I remember the first time I saw this, Mike. I was I just got my driver's permit. I was one of my first trips in the car by me driving was I saw this at a small little theater in a neighboring town called Wilmington, Illinois, and a little theater called the Marr Theater, a little single house, kind of tucked away in a residential neighborhood. It was kind of a weird zoning thing there, but what was interesting about this theater was it was on Route 66, Mike, famous Route 66, cool. A couple blocks away from the launching pad drive-in, which features this giant, the Gemini Giant. It's kind of a large metal astronaut figure built around the time of the Gemini, cool. or as NASA calls it, Gemini program. It's kind of like a roadside attraction. It's really kind of famous, but yeah, I took a group of my friends, the guys that I was in band with, Mike. Yeah, I was in band, believe it or not. A Star Wars geek that does a podcast. Believe it or not, he might have been a bit of a nerd in high school. But I took myself and the other woodwinds to this theater, and we watched it, and it just blew us all away. And I guess because the intensity and the energy of this movie, I remember a lot of older adults kind of getting up and walking out. They just kind of couldn't take the pace or the themes in the movie. It was really kind of it was really intense. And of course, when you're in high school, that story just blows up. Yeah, people were walking out of the theater, man, and then 2 weeks later, somebody died in the theater. It was just, but I remember seeing that with a group of my friends in high school after I got my driver's license. Just thought this was, I was hooked. I was in. So, you remember the first time you saw this one, Mike?
Yeah, mine experience was a little more subdued. I saw it on HBO, probably like almost a year after it came out. Maybe they always worked with the movies in really long time after they were popular.
Yeah.
But I was traumatized, about me and horror movies. my uncle had taken me to see the original Alien when I was like 8 years old, and not knowing anything about an R-rated horror movie. That movie. Oh, that movie made some scars. There were some scars there,
This is
and
it. Yeah.
I think anything related to Alien after that, I was a little timid about going to see. So I kind of just held off and wanted to see it in the bright lights of my own room. So I kind of waited until it came on HBO and saw it.
Yeah,
liked it at the time. So it did help.
It's very intense. I remember I had seen the original one probably about a month before in anticipation to see this. I had not seen it, and that one's a straight up horror movie. Probably one of the best ones I think ever done. And to come in behind it with this new take on it, I thought was just really kind of clever. So, but hey, enough of us yapping. Let's go back and check it out. So we're back in 1986, Mike. As I mentioned, Big Trouble in Little China is blowing up the box office.
Blowing up.
We were a couple months off after the greatest Super Bowl of all time, the '85 Bears, the Bears. Yeah, in my part of the country, we were still celebrating that. The Cosby Show was tearing up the airwaves on NBC on Must See Thursday. A little video game called The Legend of Zelda was released. I know that'll hit home on your side of the family a little bit. The gas was 93 cents a gallon. Oprah was soon to start her show in a couple months. We were in the middle of Hands Across America, Mike. Remember that?
Oh no!
Oh, so lame.
Oh yeah.
And a young Lady Gaga was born. So a lot of stuff was going on in 1986. But the biggest thing for us today, at least, is the release of James Cameron's Alien. So, Mike, if you're ready, hit the button.
Yes.
So the movie opens up to the 20th century fanfare music, which I still think is one of the greatest ways to start a movie. You get this really kind of maudlin music. The soundtrack kind of kicks in. The James Horner's soundtrack kind of starts here, and they're showing the vastness of space, and it's got kind of a creepy feel to it already. And we see it's a continuance of where the first movie Alien left off, where Ripley is stuck in the escape ship, so to speak, and she's blasted the alien out of the airlock, and she's safe. So she puts herself in a kind of cryogenic sleep, hoping that she'll get picked up by a salvage team, and then that's kind of where this movie picks off. Salvage team actually finds her and puts her back onto this kind of space station, and she wakes up in the hospital bed, and she's introduced to Paul Reiser, who's a weaselly little company representative, saying that the company that she worked for. They do a little exposition saying that he kind of brings her up to speed. That the big reveal here is that she's been floating out in space for 57 years, Mike. So she's everybody that she knew or had any acquaintance with is most likely dead. So that not only does that put her very fragile state of mind in some context, it makes it a little bit worse. Now that everything's gone.
Well, at least he's nice enough to call her kiddo.
Oh, what's with the weird nicknames for this guy?
I don't know.
Matthew McConaughey does that a lot in movies too, but he's got enough charm to kind of pull it off.
Yeah.
But
right.
Paul Reiser, kids, for a younger audience, Paul Reiser is the secondary villain, I guess, in Stranger Things.
Yeah. He's a second-rate Jerry Seinfeld.
That's correct. Yeah. So not so must see on Thursdays. So as we mentioned, Ripley's kind of a broken person, and in addition to that, she's got the company she worked for. She has to sit in front of this board and kind of explain why she blew up this multi-million-dollar ship from the first episode. And of course, that doesn't sit well. Her story sounds kind of weird, and they're not buying it. And so they decide not to press charges, but she does get her flight status revoked and has to take this kind of menial job as a dock loader.
Yeah. And a quick little note about, I guess, future inflation. I forgot the number they toss at her, but it's surprisingly only a double-digit million number.
Yeah.
And considering she blew up a giant spaceship, Nostromo, along with hundreds of million tons of ore that they had mined. The fact that it only was about, I don't know, say $50 million kind of surprised me a touch. I thought they would throw out a figure like, hey, this was $50 trillion,
Yeah.
But no, I was like, wow, that's not that much for
Yeah,
what was destroyed.
kind of a bargain, really. But hey,
Yeah.
but we'll get into that in our economics section, Mike, a little bit later.
Oh, thank you.
So during this, this board review, there's this smirky group of board of directors kind of not believing her story. There's a little bit of animosity there. She says, well, prove me wrong. Let's go back to the planet. He goes, well, we don't have to. There's colonists living there. So apparently, in the time Ripley had been out there, the company had sent families of colonists to kind of terraform this planet. So that doesn't sit well with her either. So we kind of cut back to her, kind of brooding in her apartment, and she gets a knock on the door, and it's Paul Reiser and this colonial marine lieutenant. They knock on the door and say, "Hey, Ripley, not so fast. Maybe your story has some legs because we've lost contact with all the colonists, and we'd like you to kind of help us." And yeah, so she's kind of resentful, obviously. She says, get out, whatever. And then they said, well, we can get your flight status, back, and you can get out of the docks. And they kind of like shame her into doing it. She's like, no way, I'm not going back, and I wouldn't be any good if I did. And then we kind of cut to her kind of jump scare. She wakes up sweating again. She keeps having these recurring dreams of the chest burster kind of getting out of her, and she says, what, to get some sort of closure, she says, she calls Burke. Well, I like the phone cards, Mike. It's all FaceTime.
Oh yeah.
But she calls them in the middle of the night and says, "You're going up."
They still smoke cigarettes.
They have these a lot, yeah. and Reebok is still around, which is encouraging.
Yeah, yes.
Her tennis shoes are Reebok when they show her in the. Yeah, so
I forgot about that.
So anyway, she said, "Well, you're going back there to wipe them out, right? Not study or anything like this." No, he said, "We're going to wipe them out." She says, "Well, I'm in." So the next scene is her kind of meeting the colonial marines, which it's so cliche now, but this was the first time there was any kind of like interplanetary military force on film, and everybody since this movie has copied this concept. It's really kind of lifted from Starship Troopers. I think Cameron made all the guys kind of read. All the actors had to read Starship Troopers so you could understand the kind of the drop zone and the bug hunt, and but it worked. And Starship Troopers is a great movie that we're going to have to get to at some point. But there's a lot of parallels there. So she kind of gives the guys a debriefing, and the Marines are just as callous as the people in the boardroom to the story. They don't have time for this hysterical woman. They think she's just a consultant or whatever. But so she kind of gives the whole rap, and they said, whatever, just show me where there are, we'll kill them. So the next scene is they kind of load up on the ship and kind of go into deep sleep and kind of head out towards the planet. And then they kind of wake up, and then it's kind of the same scenes from Alien. They all kind of get out of the. You're introduced to all the grunts, and we get introduced to Hudson, which is played by the aforementioned Bill Paxton, who's great in this movie. Yeah, I had to get it right.
Yes.
And
I got it right. Yeah.
The gruffy sergeant who I love, Al Harris. He is actually a real Marine sergeant. He's the first. One of the first African American meritorious sergeants, and a couple Purple Hearts, and just a very well decorated military guy.
He can really chomp a cigar pretty well.
I would never want to smoke a cigar, and I would certainly. Just the thought of chewing on one of those things just was revolting. But I think I'm going to steal one of your lines. He chewed that cigar as hard as he chewed the scenery.
Nice.
I just saw a little interview with this guy, and he is a complete whack job, and he's like a chain smoker. Every interview you see, he's smoking cigarettes, talking about what a badass he is and how important he was. Nice. He's just really arrogant, but he's very kind of charming at the same time. Right. But anyway, so they're setting up to pull on this planet, and they find out that their lieutenant is a noob, as they call him. He's only been on one combat drop, so they've got this lieutenant, and they got a corporate guy, and they got Ripley, so they're not real pleased about this. So they kind of drop down. They're on this main ship, and they take this little recon plane, drives the team down in a little tank, and they kind of land on the facility, and they do their little approach. And what I like about Marines, they're so cool. I mean, they make the simple things like getting in a car was so cool. I wish I had the energy that they have, just like, get hot, get hot. I love that, but just getting on in the
Yeah.
car was a really cool thing. But they get into the facility, and they're what I thought was cool here, Mike, is the soundtrack is devoid of any like modern rock and roll. It's all orchestral music, and there's long stretches of just
Long,
pure
long
silence.
silences.
And
Yeah.
I think that's what kind of separates this movie and makes it stand out for me in a slew of comparable movies like this. Is this was made for adults to like? This is an not adult theme,
Right.
not an adult movie, but it was made for
Yeah.
an adult audience that doesn't need
It doesn't need. Well, Matt. Okay, you were talking about the Marines coming down and coming down to the landing base stuff.
Yeah.
Can you just picture? I want you to picture this in your mind. An Aerosmith song blaring as they're like rocking down to the base down
Exactly.
there in the little copter, and they got this, or you have maybe a Van Halen like guitar solo
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah,
Perhaps.
like you don't need that constant stimulation for the audience.
Right.
The audience can figure out the relevance and the resonance of each scene on their own if you let them. So the scenes to that point, with the scenes where they're kind of approaching, there's aliens in there, but the scenes where they're walking through it, it's dead silent, and
Yeah, it's disconcerting. Like
yeah,
I wrote down like the lack of soundtrack in spots was
yeah,
almost like unnerving because you knew you could tell the gravity of the situation just by the
right.
was there synthesizer sound there or
Right.
violin sound or
Yeah.
just nothing.
Yeah, like what was that noise? Well, no, that noise was Eddie Van Halen's pick. No, this is real relevant stuff. They and that iconic motion sensor, the high pitched beep that increases
Oh
with
yeah.
frequency and pitch when something gets close. It's like, I see shows that do that. I call that a filler scene. Or The Walking Dead is infamous for this. The Walking Dead will take 12 minutes of a 44-minute episode by just people, creeping down a hallway thinking, okay, just come out. We know there's something in the hallway. But this was like a real relevant scene. Like, you didn't know what was going to be there. And then our first jump scare is kind of Newt, the young girl, the lone survivor of this colony, getting out. So they kind of track her down, and Ripley does a little mother-daughter bonding scene here, which is a kind of a subplot in the film, her, bonding with this younger girl. But they get to the command center. They're kind of around. They get the computers up, and they see that Hudson, played by Bill Paxton. He gets on the monitor and sees that all the little data chips that everybody implanted, all the colonies in one spot, thinking that there's some sort of town hall meeting or something. But of course, we know what it really is, Mike. And the line he uses to say that he goes, "Stop your grinning and drop your linen." I mean, come on.
Yes.
That's to the keen ear. That's a lyric from Brian Johnson, AC/DC, Back in Black, on the Shake a Leg cut. That's a AC/DC lyric. So
nice.
Even better for me. And it's this point where Ripley gets introduced to Bishop, played by Lance Henriksen, and Bishop is a synthetic or cyborg. And
no. He's a
artificial person. Sorry, yeah, he prefers the term artificial person. But the significance there is that for people that have not seen the original movie, Ripley has a sincere problem with these guys because
Bilbo Baggins.
Bilbo Baggins played the synthetic in the first version and went haywire and killed or tried to kill Ripley. So she's not a big fan of those guys, and she was not made aware that he was going to be on there. So she's got an instant resentment for him, of course, even though he's got programming in to kind of, he's a later model that's been fixed and all that stuff, but she doesn't trust him, obviously. So we get to the first kind of big set piece here, is that when they kind of explore what's going on in the compound, and as the English say, Mike, they made a meal of it. What's interesting is they're so well trained, but they're just not trained for this particular situation, right? And Cameron
they have to be near a nuclear reactor too.
They couldn't use bullets too. That didn't help. But Cameron's made a lot of parallels to Vietnam here, and he said that he wanted, the U.S. military was so much technically advanced and ahead of the Viet Cong, but the Viet Cong were had their guerrilla warfare, and he wanted to kind of capture that thematic element there. And so they get into the catacombs there, and of course the catacombs are actually lined with the aliens, and you get that big reveal where the walls come to life and kind of take out the entire team. That's generally pretty horrifying, right?
Yeah.
So they kind of botch the mission, and then the relatively green lieutenant kind of fumbles and gets knocked out. So Ripley kind of takes the leadership role and goes in there with the tank and extracts the remaining Marines out, and they barely make it. So that the rescue mission is over, and as they call for they call to retreat, and as they're doing that, they find out that the ship that could bring them back up to the mothership, aliens got on that as well and kind of crash it, and they see that they narrowly avoid getting that plane getting crashed into them because the alien gets in there and kills the pilot. So now
Game
they're
over,
stuck
man.
there. It's game over, right? And that's where Corporal Hudson freaks out. So Bill Paxton's that foundation was pretty shaky to begin with, but now that this has happened, because these Marines are cocky and they've never been put in a situation like this. They don't know how to handle failure, and he takes it the worst. So uh, Ripley kind of gives him a tongue lashing, and says, "Hey, this little girl lived in this for 6 months." He goes, "Perfect comeback." He goes, "Why don't you put her in charge?"
I love that one line.
Isn't that great? So anyway, they kind of cover the wagons and get back in the facility and kind of fortify the compound and figure out how the heck are we going to get out of here. And then we start to see Bishop and Ripley kind of finagle their relationship a little bit, and then there's a hint of a sort of romantic subplot between Corporal Hicks, played by Michael Biehn, and Ripley.
Just a hint.
Just a hint. But again, very subtle and doesn't over. That's not overdone to take you away from the main plot, which is clever, right? So,
yes.
So their idea is that they want to kind of weld all the doors shut and kind of fortify the main base, and then Bishop finds there's a little tunnel. There's an access tunnel that leads to a remote airport dock. He thinks he can crawl down this tunnel. Does it like a Shawshank Redemption, Mike? Kind of crawl down this tunnel.
Yes.
Which is as someone who's claustrophobic, that him crawling down that tunnel, it's horrifying. But his plan is to kind of go crawl all the way there. So they said, well, we'll buy you some time and all that kind of thing. So before Bishop does that, he does a little homework and he comes to the realization that the corporate goons had a play in this as well, where they were kind of using the colonists there as I guess potential hosts. They wanted to have these guys get infected and bring the colonists back to Earth with the alien technology to weaponize it. So Bishop comes to this realization and exposes Paul Reiser to the group, and that doesn't sit very well, of course. But that's where Ripley and Bishop start to mend their relationship, and there's some trust built there. So Paul Reiser goes crazy, and so during one of those nights, he intentionally kind of sabotaged some of the face hugger aliens, the little babies that grab onto your face and hold on. He kind of compromises that and tries to kill Ripley to no avail. And of course, he gets separated and then he gets killed by the aliens. But as that's happening, the aliens kind of break through and come in to finish the job, so to speak. And so they come in and take out our buddy Corporal Hudson. So Bill Paxton bites it again. But he goes out great. He goes out with a great death. And then Hicks is damaged, and Newt gets kind of separated, and Sigourney Weaver is just losing her stuff because she's finally bonded and found some humanity, and then Newt got taken away. So she gets Corporal Hicks back up to the flight deck with Bishop and says, "Hey, I've got a few minutes left. The ship will be here. It's on a kind of remote control." And she says, "Well, I'm going back in," and of course, because she's going to go try to get Newt.
Oh yeah, so this is where she Rambos up.
Oh, what a great scene too, man. So she goes down into the nest, right? Which was and she sees the queen, which is just amazing practical effect. The xenomorphs, as they refer to them, the aliens, are really kind of a hive. There's a hive mentality there, and each hive has a queen. So the queen is this giant bug, so to speak. She's got a big, abdomen like an ovipositor, and you see her like laying these eggs, and just a phenomenal scene, right? And Ripley kind of torches the place, and it's kind of a cat fights. She's not a big fan of this, but this is the scene where she kind of flames everybody up, and then you get that amazing James Horner score that everybody has stolen and copied in movies since. She kind of rushes back to the front, and she gets out of there, and they get to the deck, and the ship's not there, and she starts to lose it because Bishop betrayed her. But of course, he just had they do a little misdirect there where it wasn't stable enough, so he ends up coming back, and they fly off just in time to kind of avoid the entire facility getting blown up. And
okay, so we're quick
yeah,
stop here.
Yeah,
Full stop. This is I guess goes to the alien, and she rescued Newt. And by the way, I would love to have seen the scene. I wish they would include a scene where the alien was carrying Newt back to the nest like a football. When you when you wanted to see that scene, but maybe Private Hudson, Bill Paxton, maybe he's hanging around there too, right? They wouldn't have killed him. They need all the able-bodied humans they need. Maybe muffiny headed Paul Reiser was still hanging from a pod or something.
Well, yeah, the assumption is they're all being incubated, right?
Yeah. Right. I guess I was confused about what the aliens saw as like a kill, or what they saw as a possible like host. You know what I mean? Like,
That's maybe. It's a good point, Mike. They didn't work out all the alien ecology.
I just wanted to see the scene where the alien's carrying her back. I wanted that.
We'll file a complaint. And so they made it, you get your ending number one, where that they're on the ship, and they're kind of taking stock of everybody, and the assumption is that they're going to go back to Earth, and then she's talking to Bishop, and they have their little closure moment, and then they get that horrible, ominous scene where you see the acid kind of drip down by his shoe, and they look above, and then he gets spiked pretty good, doesn't he, Mike?
Oh yeah, he gets it right in there.
So we come to find out that the Queen has kind of stowed away and grabbed onto the ship and hitched a ride back to the main hangar on the main ship, the mothership, and she's making a mess, and she kind of neatly dissects Lance Henriksen. So he's kind of this milky torso.
She tore him in half.
Yeah,
she ripped him in half, King.
So his milky torso lands on the flight deck, and Newt runs for cover. And at this point, Ellen Ripley has had enough. She gets into the loader and locks herself in, and it's kind of a robot type thing, Mike, like a walking forklift. And she gets in the cage.
It was kind of a foreshadowing through like anachronism was the picturing Avatar. They had the same thing in Avatar. Was they had the military guys using those like mechanical robots. Around in. I thought, well, maybe Cameron lifted that from Aliens.
Well, I think he lifted it from Starship Troopers with the jumpsuits. Sorry, but yeah, so she's kind of got this exoskeleton like forklift body, and she says that great line, get away from her, you bitch. which would sound kind of hokey in another movie, but this was really relevant. She's really angry. So she has this great like wrestling match where she uses this pneumatic robot suit to kind of fight this alien, and she kind of picks it up and does like a WWF body slam and throws it down into the airlock, and she kind of tumbles in behind it, and all the while this amazing James Horner score is playing, and it's just so intense, right? And so she hits the airlock button and opens the gate, and the vacuum kicks in, and the airlock's open, and the alien gets sucked out, and of course Newt, she's just there to be compromised. So, Ripley. Yeah. So luckily the Bishop's torso's right there.
The top half, yes.
and top half grabs her, and then the door closes, and then that's it. And it's at that point you take this huge deep breath, like, oh my God, this is 2.5 hours of this pace. You're just kind of exhausted. But the end is they take Hicks and Bishop, Ripley, and Newt kind of get in the cryo sleep chamber to head back. Kind of bookends the movie, and then the movie kind of comes to an end, and like, wow, so just a super exciting, just a standalone movie, really. And I don't really know how to articulate, Mike, but when this movie was over, it was like it was an epic story in the true dictionary sense of an epic. Epic has been kind of co-opted with local slang to mean something awesome. This epic, it was epic. if you look up the word epic, it means long and lengthy. That's the
Hmm.
definition of that word. And I think what's different about this movie, and again, it's hard to quantify, but in 2 hours and 17 minutes, it felt long. It felt like a whole story had been told, and I don't think you get that with. And I'm a Star Wars guy, but
Uh-oh.
the Rise of Skywalker was the same running length, but it didn't feel like you'd seen such. You didn't feel like you were on the same kind of journey. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, like
So,
I said, there's transformation of characters. There's high stakes. There's nuclear explosions.
yeah, and there's
And after you watch, there's literal relief after you finish watching. You're like, oh my
yeah,
god, thank God that queen bitch is out that airlock.
yeah.
Oh, I can breathe.
But
Oh,
yeah, there's real tension all the way through because
right.
you're not sure they're going to make it.
Yeah,
And when people die, you feel bad because you get to know them as a character. You know the relevance of them, and there's a resonance to
yeah.
that when they die. It's not, oh,
And unlike Alien Covenant, there's not like one of those sinister endings where, oh
oh,
wait, you're really not gonna go cryogenic sleeping. I'm gonna kill you and
oh,
implant all the
yeah,
colonists with aliens, and
yeah.
there's your ending.
So
Sorry,
let's
spoilers.
get to that. So, so the aftermath here is it made $10 million in its opening weekend, which in today's economy equates to about 26 million. It had an $85 million box office at the end of the day domestically, which equates to about 226, and then worldwide, in today's dollars, was $350 million. So it was a big hit for 20th Century Fox. As I mentioned, it kind of saved their bacon and kind of cemented James Cameron as a real kind of tour de force. He's only like 30 years old when he made this movie. So
Wow.
yeah, so it won a couple Oscars. It won for visual effects, all practical effects again, and the sound effects, well deserved on both of those. But what I like best about this is it was Sigourney Weaver was nominated for Best Actress for this role. It was the first time ever a female had been nominated in an action role. So a lot of people
Wow.
forget that she, she ultimately lost to Marley Maitland for like Children of Lesser
Oh,
God.
lesser
Yeah,
God. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, I think it's fair to say that people remember her performance a little more than that one. But sorry,
Yeah.
Marley, but you still did a great job. It launched several chronological sequels and kind of tangential sequels, all of which are just really not that good. Alien 3 was really kind of a dark turn. David Fincher directed that, one of our better directors.
Wow.
But it was really kind of a dark turn, and everybody dies, and all the work that they did on Stay Alive is just wiped out with the one little line of dialogue, and it just was kind of a dark, twisted version of the final. I wasn't a big fan of it, Mike, obviously, but it had some
Yeah. I can
neat
barely remember
visuals.
it.
Yeah, again, that's kind of the problem. And then had the this horrible Alien Resurrection, which I guess is a chronological sequel where again we start to dip into the
Wow.
toxic modern tropes of movies where alien or Ripley comes back to life.
Is that where they clone her or something, right?
Yeah,
Like this is a couple hundred years
so the
later, and they use her.
end of Alien 3, Alien 3, Ripley gets she casts herself into a pit of fire as one of the aliens kind of bursts out of her body. She ends it,
Oh
so
wow.
she dives in lava. But for some convoluted way, they bring her genetic material back to life in 4, and then
Huh.
Winona Ryder's in there. It's probably one of the worst movies I've seen in a long time. Alien Resurrection. Don't waste your time on it. Just stop.
So I'm confused. So does I guess I got confused. Does grown up Newt ever appear in a movie, or she just is her Aliens was her first and last kind of thing? Like she's not like
Yeah, like I said, the
okay.
the surviving members of this movie, aliens, are all they all die in Alien 3. They don't survive
Oh,
they
okay,
don't
okay.
survive the cryogenic process. So
Oh no. So okay,
Michael
so
Biehn and yeah.
it really does continue right after this movie. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
but like I said, if you don't watch it, you don't have to worry about what happens. So I just stop at Aliens, you'll be fine. And they made some really crappy tangential sequels, more or less prequels. The Prometheus, where Ridley
Oh
Scott
yeah.
got back into the original and tried to
Ugh.
upstage. I don't know, that movie's pretty horrible. And then the sequel to that was Alien Legacy or Alien. I don't know what was it
Covenant.
called. Covenant. Thank you.
We watched it in the theater.
Yes.
We survived the flute playing scene. So
Yeah,
I
exactly.
can
So
remember that one.
yeah, again, the fact that we can hardly remember it tells you how successful that hot bag of garbage was. But yeah, this, and that you had all the Alien versus Predator movies, which I don't count because those are video game movies at best. But yeah, just the stink burgers, Mike.
Ugh.
Yeah. So yeah, so it did cement its way in the ethos of pop culture. I mean, Space Marines are in every video game now, and there's always some sort of
Yep.
military element. And H.R. Geiger's Aliens, the original concept art is still there out there, and people still, that's an iconic image. So I mean, it really sets a precedence. It really kind of stands apart for all the trends that it's set. And then of course Cameron has just really taken the thematic elements of this movie and applied them to this huge portfolio of very successful action slash
Mm-hmm.
science fiction movies with True Lies and T2 and The Abyss before that, and then
Yeah.
culminating with the Avatar. He's literally inventing scientific technology to make movies now. Which is, however you feel about Avatar, people say the plot is horrible, but shut up with your plot criticisms. People that go see Armageddon, or
Oh no.
don't have the nerve to complain about plot. Yeah. So
Hey! I got a visual, quick visual. Ben Affleck was animal crackers on Liv Tyler's stomach.
Mike, we talked about this. You're not supposed to talk about that to me. You're not supposed to bring that up.
Oh boy,
it's going to take
Sorry.
me days and days to come back down from it. So yeah, that's the end, and so let's put it in our grumpy meter, Mike. I don't think there's going to be any surprises here for me, at least. When I saw this in the theater for the first time at 16 years old, and I drove myself to the theater and drove my friends there, and we saw this amazing army guys shooting aliens with machine guns. I mean, come on, who's not going to like that, right? Yeah. So I don't watch this movie as frequently as I'd like. Prior to that, I failed to mention in 1987 they released the special edition, Mike, Laserdisc. Of course, I bought it.
Of course.
Yes. But it was one of the first, instances of a director's cut being re-released. And so in the director's cut of this movie, there's an extra like 40 minutes, and they kind of focus on. There's a subplot with Ripley's daughter that probably has more resonance now, but the reason the Newt relationship would be more supported by this. But it turns out that Ripley's daughter was 67 years old when she passed away from cancer. So she gets back to Earth and sees that.
Wow.
Yeah. So Ripley lost her daughter, but she didn't know about it until her daughter was 67 years old. So they had that. And there was a lot more gunplay in this one, and there's a lot more focusing on Newt's family and the colonists and how that whole thing went down. But just kind of fleshes up some of the backstory. But it's not superfluous by any means, but it's just you can the theatrical version you can kind of get by with. But for those that are interested, there is an extended edition out there. So, but yeah, so like I said, I've been hooked. So I watched this movie. I watched the theatrical version again. It was the first time I'd watch it from beginning to end in years. And again, I think I've kind of echoed these points already, but it's just to see something that's so well executed and so well done. I'm going to stay right where I am. I'm going to go up a little bit, maybe to 4.5 out of 5. It's just a really kind of a flawless movie. Time has been very good to it, and it just kind of reinforces how strong and how well this was put together that it can stand up to this day. So that's kind of my take on it. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, I'm with you too. Kind of like I said last podcast about The Fifth Element, these movies that are set in the future, it's hard to kind of, say, oh, that movie's dated, except for, like I said, the puffy hair and the people still smoking cigarettes and Reebok. But it's a classic war movie. And I remember when I first saw it being pleasantly surprised it was not a true horror movie. Like there's a lot of graphic violence that is omitted from this movie, which I'm glad for. I know that Paul Reiser's character is getting his head chopped off or getting eaten, or the people that are in the rescue plane to pick him up or getting attacked, because you just see blood splatter on the windscreen. So you're like, okay, they died, and it was unnecessary violence that you didn't need to see, and it didn't really help. I mean, you had the horror aspect of like you said, the wall coming alive, or just
Yeah.
seeing people cocooned up on a wall and like these poses. You're like, oh my god, this is frightening
Yeah.
enough. And
And those things you don't see, your imagination does the rest. That's how it works. It's
yeah,
very well done.
yeah. So like I said, when I first saw it, I would easily a 4-star movie, and
Yeah.
I saw really nothing on the rewatch to change that opinion. It is a classic war movie. I mean, you have all the elements of, like, the cigar chomping sergeant. You have the complaining about the bad chow, gung ho Marines. You have the stereotypical green officer who, like you say, was a noob and didn't know what he was doing.
But gets his
And then,
redemption. Yeah.
right, yep. And most importantly, at least for the teenage Mike and the 51-year-old Mike, was no lovey-dovey. I mean, when you watch a war movie like The Longest Day or Midway, you don't have all that romancy kind of kissy,
Yeah.
smushy stuff. So you don't want that. This is intense war. Even like you said, with the scene with Michael Biehn and Sigourney Weaver and him showing her how to use the gun, it's like you could see some romantic tension if you want, but they're not there for that. They're there to learn how to use a freaking grenade launcher. Go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I said, the best war movies, which I would include this as a war movie, and leave out the mushy stuff. And I really appreciate that. And
Yeah.
like I said, on the rewatching of it, I see it as what it is. It's an epic. It's
Yeah.
very well done, very well acted. There's no complaints on my end. There's who cares? When you got a good story, good acting, that's what you came to see.
Yep. They could pull it off. You don't need all that extra stuff if you do a good script and you have a well executed plot and good actors and good practical effects that still hold up. It goes a long way, and this one just checked all those boxes for sure. So,
oh yeah.
So this is usually the area where we kind of talk about what we're watching currently. That's not a classic movie, and I don't have anything this week, Mike, because I've been watching. I've been watching so many of these movies multiple times to write the script. But yeah, so if I had to suggest something, I think the war movie thing that you talked about is this isn't a hidden gem by any means, but Rogue One, Star Wars Rogue One.
Yes.
It's the only Disney property that is like, I mean, I've talked about how much I love Star Wars, so I'm not going to even attempt to be critical, but what I like this one the best because it's just that there's it's a war movie, and people die and they don't come back to life, and it was actually I enjoyed that. I watched that movie a couple weeks ago, and as I was watching this, I saw there was a lot of parallels. I think they lifted a lot of stuff in Rogue One from this movie, especially with the the subplot with Andor and Jyn. They care for each other, but it wasn't a romantic story. But they were in the middle of a war, so I guess if I had to come up with something off the cuff, I would say skip the Obi-Wan series and go watch Rogue One again. It's just amazing. So, Mike, are you watching anything right now?
I'm trying to stay away from my wife, who's watching Snowflake Mountain on Netflix. So please, podcast listeners, avoid this show at all costs.
Death, where is thy sting?
So again, this week I'm going back in time and rewatching Near Dark. I haven't seen it, but now that I know, I've just seen two great co-stars of that movie and this Aliens movie. I'm going to see that, and I want to see Vasquez now. I didn't realize was in this movie, so I'm going to check out Near Dark. And, it's a great vampire flick from what I remember, and Bill Paxton. What else can I say?
Of course, yeah. So Cameron's kind of a man whore, kind of a skirt chaser. He was, I think, either married to or dating Catherine Bigelow, that director of Near Dark at the time. So they kind of shared some of their actors. And he had relationships with the producer on Aliens, Gale Ann Hurd. He wouldn't do the movie unless his partner was the producer. That didn't buy him any points with the British crew either. And then, of course, he had the romantic relationship with Lyndall Hamilton. So, but
of course,
what I think is funny about the phenomenon, Mike, is normal people like to criticize Hollywood people for hooking up, But hey, Mike, where did you meet your wife? At work.
At work.
Where did I meet my wife? At work. so it's just one of those things. You're around people that kind of in that environment, things just happen. So it's just funny how people from Hollywood get more criticism for I don't know why, but just about everybody I know met their partner at work. Oh, all right. Well, enough of our social commentary.
No one wants to hear that.
Yeah, no one wants to hear that. So again, thanks everybody for listening. If you'd like to find out more about our wonderful program, you can check us out on Instagram at Grumpy Nostalgia. And if you'd like to send us an email, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at nostalgiagrumps@gmail.com. And as we mentioned, we're getting close to the end of our first season. We're going to go 13 episodes per season. We're thinking about ending this season with kind of a spectacular, where we're talking about maybe doing some lists episodes and some discussion episodes. And we'd love to have you be part of that. So if you're interested in maybe participating in the show, or if you've got something interesting to say, if you'd like to be part of the show and sit in for some of these segments, we'd love to hear from you. So we are taking any kind of application, so to speak. If you'd like to sit in and be part of the show and give your point, it certainly can't be any worse than ours. But we're fielding candidates to sit in with us and kind of review some of these movies and go through some, like I said, top 5 lists or whatever. We'd love to get connected with our base. So if you're interested in being part of that, let us know and send us an email. So Mike, that's all I'm going to do for today. We're going to wrap it up here. Anything else you want to add before we leave?
Justin, we're on an express elevator to hell going down.
Game over, man. All right, well, that's going to do it, guys. We're going to wrap it up. For Mike James, this is Justin, and we will see you again next time.